What's up, Fantasy Champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to thrivefantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's thrivefantasy.com, promo code SS Network. Do you like the Oakland A's? Are you a fan of the Golden Knights? Do you love the Los Angeles Chargers? Well then, my friend, you're in the right place. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show with your host, Jake the Snake SIlva, brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again. We are live on a Monday night. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening tonight. We're live on all platforms, Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch as well. Hope all of you guys are having a fabulous Monday night. I certainly am. Just coming fresh off of a weekend trip. And sometimes, when you put in a lot of hard work, and not to mention too, it sometimes kind of gets the best out of you. Can be exhausting at times. Sometimes could take at least a little bit of our energy. But I'm glad to be here on a Monday night to talk to all of you guys on what's going on in the last couple of days, in the last couple of weeks, because right now a lot of things are starting to brew up. But if it is your first time being here on the Spotlight Sports Network and also being here on the Snake Sports Talk Show, I encourage you guys to like, follow, and subscribe on all social media platforms. I will at some point down the stretch, because we're in a brand new month. We're in March. And by the way, I will at some point have a giveaway coming up. That's actually going to be in the middle of the month of March. You guys do not want to end up missing it. I will keep you guys up to date on that. But in the meantime, hope you guys are all going to be having a great week this week. So I know a lot of people, I'm going to shift to this, because a lot of people have been wanting my input on a lot of things. You asked about my input about the Carson Wentz deal. I gave you my piece of the pie and my thoughts on the move to Indianapolis. I even gave you my input on the Deshaun Watson thing. I know for a fact that Houston is kind of stuck in a jam and they need to get rid of him. Otherwise, he's going to sit out the season. He's not going to play a single down with the Texans, and so on and so forth. But we ain't talking about this tonight. I'm going to tell you something here that is kind of relatable with life. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting in this area. So the last couple of days and the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing buzz after buzz after buzz. And a lot of it is relating to Russell Wilson. Because right now, it just seems like things have gotten out of hand. And things don't seem to be on the same page. And here's what's interesting about this, because it's a two-part segment here. Because one, I'm defending Russell Wilson, and at the same time, I'm also giving a little bit of clarity of what's going to happen to the Seattle Seahawks if this happened. So right now, with what we've been hearing, and not to mention it being on mainstream media, I've been telling a lot of people about this. This just became a breakout story in the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks, and I just been kind of shutting things out. I made the decision. I was just like, you know what? Things are kind of just getting crazy enough on social media. I'm going to step away from it on my personal on my personal end of things. And until I'm ready to, to kind of come back to it and reshape and refocus, I'll jump right back in. But this is kind of the thing that I look at with people and I look at with fans. Because the second they hear something from mainstream media, it becomes one of the big topics. It's a big thing. Here's one thing that I will tell you about Russell Wilson. Russ in 2012 was not looked at a whole lot by NFL scouts. He was not. In fact, not a lot of people really paid attention to Russell. Even when he was in Wisconsin, even when he was up in the draft, in the scouting combine, nobody paid attention. Seattle gave him an opportunity and a chance. And sure enough, down the road, in 9 years that Russell Wilson has played, 8 of the 9 years, Russell has been quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. They've made the playoffs. They've made it to 2 Super Bowls in that span. Russ has won 1. Could have won 2. But we all know the controversy behind that. Here's the interesting thing you have to look at with Russell Wilson. I mean, what do we really kind of see him as? We usually see him a lot of his activities on the field, right? It's interesting because Russell Wilson's the type of person that he smiles. He looks happy. And at the same time, he walks around, buttoned up. And at the same time, that's what a face of a franchise looks like. And Russell, he presents that in the best way possible. Knows exactly the words to say, knows exactly every single topic and strategy, and not to mention how he executes. And we've said this all the time. Seattle will always go as far as Russ takes them. That's every single year, whether they make the playoffs or if they even make it all the way to the divisional, maybe even to the NFC Championship. That's as far as Russell could possibly take Seattle. But here's one thing that I can say defending Russ. Number one is you could say what you want to as far as the head coaching job is concerned. Because Pete Carroll, he had 2 opportunities in the NFL. Both of them, a lot of people seen was failures. He was a complete successor when he was in the collegiate level with USC. And he's won a lot of national championships. He's won a lot of different Pac-10 at the time, Pac-10 titles before making that move, which would have been the final time he would have ever tried out for the NFL again. And Russell Wilson turned out to be one of his top successors. This is what's kind of the interesting part about the relationship between Russ and Pete Carroll. Because all Pete has to really do is reshape the defense because his number one strength has always been the secondaries. And a lot of us knew that. We remember the years of the Legion of Boom, right? Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Byron Maxwell, and Earl Thomas. And there were so many others who have come after those times. But the Legion of Boom has not been the same. The defense themselves has not been the same. And Russ kind of feels like he has to carry them out of the trenches. We've seen Russ do this multiple times. Way too many times. But here's a funny fact. Russell never gets hurt. He never gets hurt. Even if he gets knocked down or he gets sacked, he's not suffering he's not suffering kind of like one of those jaw-dropping injuries. He's not. It's not making Seattle feel it's not making them feel at least a little bit more, concerned, or they feel like they're in danger. Because Russell always finds a way out of danger most of the time, right? The only problem with Russell Wilson, and this is what's kind of interesting. Think back to the early days of Russell Wilson, from 12 through 14. One, he had a bunch of offensive pieces. Golden Tate, his favorite target of all, Doug Baldwin. Had Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse. He even had a run game with Marshawn Lynch and a bunch of others. Not to mention he had a healthy offensive line. Max Unger, Russell Okung. There were a bunch of players. And it seemed like at that time, Seattle was clicking. 2013 was the Super Bowl year. And of course, everybody was kind of concerned about that because of how Denver's run was, and then not to mention where Seattle got into. And they win a Super Bowl. They go into it as well. And Percy Harvin, another really good wide receiver. People would also say little bits and pieces of Sidney Rice, but Sidney Rice didn't even stay healthy. The following year, 2014, they make it into the Super Bowl again, was one of the toughest teams in the NFC. And of course, always in that one crucial play that everybody remembers, the interception by Malcolm Butler. Okay, that's always the crucial play that everybody remembers in that Super Bowl alone. Jermaine Kearse's catch, they made it close to the end zone, was maybe one of the best momentum Seattle had, but then got cut down. And since that span, Seattle has not been the same. The defense has not been the same. What's going on, Water King? What's going on, Ben? What's going on, Key in the building? Shout out to Key in the building. Check out all of her great content. We had a lot of news talks, especially with the JJ Watt thing. I'll talk about that a little later. But definitely check her out here on the Spotlight Sports Network at Key. So my thing of it is just with Russ, and you know what's funny is the one person that he admires in the NFC and even in the NFL as a whole, Aaron Rodgers. The problem with it with Russell Wilson is the way he really tried to describe it and not to mention deliver it was not sound. Because we all know what's happening in Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. They're not giving him a secondary receiver outside of Devontae Adams. Not to mention, they let go of Blake Martinez, which I will never understand that move. They lose one of their ball-hogging linebackers, and then they end up cutting Christian Kirksey. So something seems to be up with Green Bay, and they can't afford all these players. They can't afford Kirksey. They can't afford Aaron Jones. They can't afford a lot of these players. So they have to cut back on a lot of players. That's what's happening. In Seattle's case and in Russell Wilson's case. I mean, Russ wants to win championships. Who doesn't? But at the same time, it feels like Russell's not getting enough support. He's not getting enough support on an offensive line that since Okung and Unger were gone, they have not been the same. They've been mediocre. They've been suffering injuries, and not to mention the playoffs. That wild card round against the LA Rams, he was sacked 5, almost close to 6 times. That's unacceptable for an offensive line who you have a franchise quarterback that you need to protect. It's unacceptable. And here's the other part. Where was the offensive weapons the entire time? DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde. Everybody disappeared. Isn't that interesting? Everybody seemed to disappear at the worst time possible. And Seattle couldn't even get their offense rolling. So if I'm Russell Wilson, how do you think I'd feel? Of course I'd feel disappointed. Of course I'd feel pissed off. But here's the difference. Russell doesn't want to leave Seattle. So this whole thing with mainstream media saying he wants to leave Seattle and all that, don't believe that bullcrap. Don't believe it. Because Russell got paid the extension. Seattle did Russ a favor. They traded away picks. They ended up opening cap space so they could keep him. I mean, that's what the Seahawks did. So they kept their franchise quarterback, and rightfully so. This is where I'm going to get up into the second part. Because in Seattle's case, and since Russ arrived, okay, Seattle was always that middle of the pack type of organization, maybe a little bit into the lower end. Okay, they may have been on the lower end of the NFC West and in the NFC as a whole. Okay, so Seattle hadn't really made their big jump until Russell Wilson happened. And let me ask you this for Seahawks fans and even for NFL fans. Okay, when was the last time Seattle had a great quarterback? Like had one that was out of the box, like he was outside the box. He was also a guy that was mobile, had a great throwing arm, and overcame a lot of adversities. When was the last time Seattle ever had a great quarterback like that? Rick Meyer, please. Rick Meyer only spent at least a couple of years in Seattle early on, and then Meyer completely went down the drain. Matt Hasselbeck, listen, he's greatly respected. But even so, after the Super Bowl appearance in Super Bowl 40, Seattle was always close, but never had the cigar. They never did. Okay, they even had a great run game with Sean Alexander. They had Nate Burleson. They had Deion Branch. They had a bunch of real good players. And they even had some real good linebackers. But my God. And you want to continuously go down the line with this. And then you talk about Matt Flynn. You talk about the late Tavares Jackson. Seattle never really had that great of a quarterback who who was thinking outside the box and was very, he made his mark. Russ is Seattle's franchise. This is one of the interesting things. And I know how Seattle feels. I know how they are. Okay. They kind of feel like at this point in the last couple of days, in the last couple of weeks, they're sick of Russ. Don't fall into this mainstream media crap. Don't. Because here's the thing. Russ doesn't want to leave Seattle. The only thing he feels is he feels disappointed. He feels disappointed. And at the same time, he needs help. He needs an offensive line. But good God, this whole thing saying he's not happy in Seattle. He's not happy up over here. So they just might as well trade. It's not that easy to have a franchise quarterback, by the way. It's really not that easy. Okay, people think it's so easy to treat quarterbacks like diapers, but here's the funny thing. The Eagles gave away Carson Wentz for literally nothing. The Colts didn't even suffer with it. They only gave away a 3rd-round pick and a 2nd-round pick that could easily turn into a 1st-rounder. That's all the Colts gave up. Who knows with the Deshaun Watson thing? But Houston has to figure this out. But I'm going to tell you this right now. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be pretty ugly. The Jets right now, they have a lot of options. They have a ton of options. I mean, Sam Darnold, you either keep him and work on it, or you go and get Zach Wilson, or you go and get Justin Fields, you go and get Deshaun Watson. You have plenty of options, and you even have draft picks to add to it. And then, of course, and here's what's funny. San Francisco at one point was buzzing, but John Lynch made it clear Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback. So lay off him. Give him at least another chance. If he still does not produce and he continues to get hurt, then you move off him. And it's cheaper. So I just feel like that this thing with Russell Wilson is just kind of ridiculous. And Seattle should know better than this. It's ridiculous. So I'm just like, if you're Seattle right now, don't listen to mainstream media. Okay? Don't even plug your ears into it. Don't even don't even feast your eyes, on this whole thing or even get a thought. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just turn your cheek and turn the other way around. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Seattle would make the dumbest mistake if they ever got rid of Russell Wilson. They would be making a huge mistake. So I just feel like, in these last couple of days and in these last couple of weeks, I'm just like, you know what? I'm kind of over that. And at the same time, I don't even see it happening. I really, really don't. All Seattle needs to do is they just need to give Russ help. If you give Russ help, you give him an offensive line, maybe you go in and search out and get at least a couple of good weapons and at the same time shape your defense, then you can make him happy. Then he won't even have to talk. But that's the other part that even you hold Russ accountable for. I understand what he's feeling, and I understand what he's trying to get his point across, but the delivery is not sound. A lot of us get held accountable for that. But I'm just telling you, I mean, this is this is just one that really just caught my attention, and I think it's kind of bogus and ridiculous. So, all right, coming up next, because just a few hours, a couple of hours ago throughout the day, J.J. Watt made one of the most surprising signings that nobody, like all of us football fans, including myself, didn't even see coming. And it's going to be interesting, and I'm going to break that down. Also, you're going to be talking at least a little bit of NBA, because you know what? There are some teams right now that are cooking, and there are some teams right now that are kind of struggling, but they're kind of staying in at least a little bit in the middle and the bottom of the pile. But I'll be talking a little bit more about that. And then, of course, at the bottom of the hour, in my best for last, I'm going to be talking more about baseball, because baseball's back, baby. Baseball is back. Oh, man. And I'm going to be giving you my top 10 MLB teams going into the 2021 season. So, you guys, I'm going to tell you right now, if you guys love sports, you guys love talking about it, but at the same time, you guys are kind of thinking in the back of your head, hey, I'd like to produce at least some sports content. I'd like to do all of this and that, but I may not have a laptop. I may not have, all the equipment. I may not have a podcast studio to do so. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Because you know what? There's an app for that actually has all of the background designs. They even have everything you need to produce your content, get yourself out there in all social media platforms. And there is a place for that. It's called Media, Meedia. You download it on the Google Play and the App Store. Look it up. You download it today. You're going to end up customizing your backgrounds. You can also end up customizing, having, like a press conference, or you're having an interview. You're basically your own personal PR at the palm of your hand on your smartphone. And what's best of all, there's no equipment required. None of that. Everything is all built in and everything is customized. And all you got to do is just click the record button and start giving out your content. And it spreads out to all of the major social media platforms and so much more. Download Media today and be your own personal PR at the palm of your hand. Media, Meedia, available now at the App Store and Google Play.
Welcome to the My City, My Game pod show featuring Raider J77, your place for all things Raiders and all things Trailblazers. Brought to you by the Spotlight Sports Network. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Now let's go.
But I know that's just in my mind. I know everything is just in my mind. Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want to be a superstar? Do you really want to get dangerous? Do you even know where the groupies are? Bitches out here be...
Welcome to Hamler's house.
So, of course, guys, as you've seen all of those shows here on our short break, welcome back to the Snake Sports Talk Show. You guys want to check out more shows and also more content here on the Spotlight Sports Network? Definitely check out all of the followings. Check out My City, My Game with Raider J77, who's got you covered on Raiders and Trailblazers content. Check out Malguli in the Gully Zone. He's always got something to talk about with everything wrestling and everything Chicago. That's the Bulls, the Bears, the Cubs, and so much more, even the Chicago Blackhawks. Definitely check him out at Malguli in the Gully Zone. Also, check out Key in the building for everything Philadelphia, all of our diehard Philadelphia fans, Eagles, Flyers, Phillies, and the Sixers. She's got all the content there for you. Key in the building. Gangrene David for all you diehard New York Jet fans up out there, and also the house that's got you covered on all Mets and Raiders content. That is Jeff Hammond, a.k.a. Hammer, at Hammer's house here on the Spotlight Sports Network. It's kind of interesting, and it's really kind of got me thinking. And I just also, real quick, just want to shout out to all of my my fans here, all in the chats. What's going on? Sports highlights. What's going on? Niners and Patriots. What's going on? Major sports. Charles and everybody. Appreciate you guys. I know you guys are concerned, but we won't have Hammer on here tonight. And we don't have Jeremy on here tonight either. Jeremy's kind of got a long week this week, but we wish him the best of luck this week because there's a lot of things that are kind of going on. But he will be back by next week. I promise you guys. So, it's really kind of got me thinking. And I looked at this deal earlier and I thought, no way. No way. How? So JJ Watt came out and said, because he was playing, this whole, he was playing kind of this whole antic. He was kind of playing, years ago, I used to go to a magic show. I went to one of the most famous magicians here in Las Vegas, where I was born and raised and live in, Lance Burton. I'm sure a lot of people knew the name, maybe have seen the show, or maybe, have seen some of the commercials and so much more. But JJ Watt was kind of playing, he was playing the magician's hand. He was not revealing his secret. He was not revealing his choice. So he was kind of having fun and he was playing around with this whole thing. A lot of people kind of speculated. They thought, he might go back home to Wisconsin. I mean, he was a Badger, and he's got family that live up over there. And his brothers, TJ and Derek, they were all Wisconsin Badgers. So maybe he might go back home. That wasn't the case. Or maybe he might go to Pittsburgh because that's where his brothers are at. Not even that ended up happening. So this was interesting. And I'm going to break this down. So JJ Watt signed a 2-year, $31 million contract with a guarantee of $23 million to him. Kind of interesting, right? And here's what's kind of fascinating about this. And we watch with JJ Watt. And JJ Watt's the type of person that he's very motivating. He's a leader. He's a guy that also produces a lot. Now, we know because of injuries and so much more, there's all of this rant and rave saying, well, I'm not sure how long you really are going to, you're going to get production out of him. Well, here's the thing. I think initially JJ Watt did care about getting paid. There's no doubt about that. I think at the end of the day, Houston's kind of, they've kind of been in this loophole. JJ Watt's gone. Deshaun Watson might be out the door. They already traded away DeAndre Hopkins, but here's what's interesting too. So DeAndre Hopkins, former Texan teammate, I'm sure kept a lot of close relations with JJ Watt. I'm sure of it. And it made the move. And Arizona's not a bad place to live at. It's not. It really, really isn't. I mean, look, you're going to be dealing with summers where it's going to be 120 degrees. But at the same time, it's not a bad place to live in. And here's the best part. There is no state tax there in Arizona. There's not. So all that guaranteed money is going straight to your bank account. So I think, by the way, BL, for Raider J, I know he's been busy for a while. He's been taking on this new job and stuff like that. Wishing the best of luck to him. I know he hasn't really produced any content. But yeah, hopefully we'll have him back and having some uploads at some point soon. So, but it again, Arizona's it's not a bad spot to really be at. And here's what's interesting about this too, because now there's 2 pass rushers for the Cardinals, Chandler Jones and JJ Watt. So you're going to have a bunch of pass rushers in the NFC West. Nick Bosa in San Francisco, Aaron Donald with the Rams. I don't even know who's going to be their pass rusher for the Seahawks, to be honest, because I thought they fixed that problem with Carlos Dunlap, but I was wrong. Doesn't look like it. Now you got Arizona now with J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones. It's going to be interesting because this is also a team that's getting younger, and it's going pretty interesting. Because now they got Isaiah Simmons that is still developing, and from what I'm told, he's a hybrid type linebacker. He's a guy that could play everywhere. But we'll see how he develops over time. What I find very interesting about this, because the NFC West, Seattle might not have Jaron Reed. Yeah, they may not have Jaron Reed either. So I just feel like with Arizona right now, they're still in the building blocks. They're still in the building blocks. Yeah, I did. So I just think right now, because they're so close, there still are some pieces that I'm sure Arizona is going to be working on throughout this all off season. And I love Kyler Murray. I really, really do. But at the same time, I'm not sure exactly how legit Cliff Kingsbury's system is. And I've been telling people, regardless, even if you had Josh Rosen or you had Kyler Murray, the offensive line seriously needs help. It seriously needs help. And the defense needs to be at least a little better, but I think J.J. Watt could be the difference maker in this. And I think, I really can't say Arizona would be an NFC championship caliber type team. I'll be honest with you. I think they could push their ticket into the playoffs. They can, but I cannot predict NFC championship. I can't. Because think about some of the teams that are in the NFC as of right now. You got Green Bay, that I'm sure they're going to be suffering a bunch of pieces, but you still have Aaron Rodgers. You got San Francisco, where they're getting everybody back. And at the same time, they're not moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo. So if Jimmy G stays healthy, then it's a different scenario. The Rams, they get Matthew Stafford. And I think that's going to be a complete difference maker. How big of a difference maker is it? I don't know. I really don't know. And then, of course, you look at Tampa Bay, and you look at, you look at this whole thing. Tampa Bay is just unstoppable. So it will be interesting to see how Arizona really plays in the middle of this mix. I just think right now they can punch their ticket into the playoffs. But as far as NFC Championship goes, I can't predict that. I think they'll be very interesting. But, who knows? Who knows? But I thought this J.J. Watt thing was very interesting. I thought it was pretty crazy. But now we know. Now we know exactly where J.J. Watt is going. He's not going back home to Wisconsin. He's not going with the Packers. He's not going to Pittsburgh with his brothers and stuff like that. So I think, understandably, going to Arizona, it's not a huge move. I think it still is a good upgrade, but they still have some pieces. They still have some pieces to work on. And it is going to take at least a little bit of time. I'm sure too, hopefully by this year, we'll start to get practices in. We'll start to, we'll start to at least initiate some OTAs and more intensified practices as well, just to get everybody back on back on the right page, but only time will tell. But I think at the same time, Arizona, it's going to be very interesting. I don't think they're in a position where they're going to make a massive jump, but this is a start. This is an absolute start. And I'm just speaking as a realist. Okay. Not taking it personal in any other way. I'm just speaking it from a realist standpoint. So time now for the hot press. So a lot of news sparking up as well here for what's been coming up here up on the hot press, and we will bring that out here for you. So so we know right now that Arizona, they've got they got JJ Watt. It's going to be very interesting. And I think who knows exactly how far that they'll really take it. They are an interesting team. Do not get me wrong about that. But I have to see exactly how Cliff Kingsbury's going to step this up after last year's performance. So, of course, with the latest rumors with Russell Wilson. So there are a couple of teams that are out there that in case, if they were to strike a deal, they mentioned a few teams here. They mentioned a few teams that were featured is the Saints, the Bears, the Jets, and the Cowboys. There are a couple of those teams that are there. My only interesting thing about this is with Russell Wilson, and again, I'm not saying that this is a guarantee that this is going to happen down the stretch, but this is interesting that Russell Wilson will had these teams on his mind. Let me just tell you this. Chicago right now, I don't know if Chicago really can afford Russell Wilson. I mean, they're dealing with a terrific defense, but at the same time, you barely have any offensive weapons, at least some developing ones. You barely, David Montgomery is getting better and better. I think they're starting to develop that run game, but they still need at least a little bit more pieces, and they also need an offensive line. They need a better one. So I don't know if the Bears are really kind of a guarantee. The Jets are very optimistic. They have all those draft picks. I mean, they could do whatever they wanted to with those picks. But at the same time, Russ needs more help on that offensive line. He's going to be going from a mediocre offensive line in Seattle to going into the Jets, where they're needing some serious help on the offensive line too. And they're still developing. Then you've got the Saints, which, by the way, the Saints are the type of team that they'll take a swing at anybody. But, of course, that is a risk worth taking because the Saints no longer have Drew Brees. And they're going to be relying on Jameis Winston. It's a question mark on Jason, on Taysom Hill. So I don't know exactly what New Orleans' plans are really going to be. But as of right now, they're going with Jameis Winston, but they could very much try to take a swing at Russell Wilson, but I'm not sure how that's going to work out. And then finally, the Cowboys. This is one that I might actually talk at least a little bit of. The Dallas Cowboys, they're kind of stuck in this jam because, number one, they're overpaying their players who are top 20, in my opinion. Like DeMarcus Lawrence, Jalen Smith, these guys are top 20 players. They haven't really even made huge impacts. And until they do, this is now just kind of they're stuck. They're stuck. They're trapped. And not to mention, too, that they spent their money on Zeke and they don't even bother to paying on Dak, which Dak has been winning majority of their games. So it already tells you what Dallas is going through. They cannot win games without Dak. And they're very reliant on him. And so they're kind of trapped in this position. So I'm not sure if Dallas really could be the answer, in my opinion. But I think it's kind of interesting. So Chris Godwin is on the free agent market, and he went about his way, and he said this while he was also on NFL Network talking about his future and where he might be. But he also did mention that he's not steering away from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and says he would play on franchise tag. So Chris Godwin ended up mentioning this, quote unquote. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, similar to like a lot of guys, obviously we all want to have a long-term security. We all want to be able to take care of the people that we love. So that's the ideal situation. But a franchise tag is not something that I can control. If that's what keeps me here, then that's what it is. And I'll play on it and go back to war with my guys. Like I said, I love it here in Tampa. I love what we have building, and I would love to stay. So Chris Godwin's very optimistic. I mean, he's an optimistic type of person. So, and again, a lot of teams are going to try to get aggressive with Chris Godwin. But again, this is all part of the Tom Brady movement. This is because Tom is the reason a lot of people want to stay. I mean, it's loaded. Wide receivers, linebackers, secondaries, offensive line, run game. A lot of people are just kind of asking themselves, like, why leave that? Now, think about it, because the wide receiver position is loaded for Tampa Bay. So even if Chris Godwin left, they still have Scotty Miller. They still have Mike Evans. They still even have a bunch of tight end pieces. They still do have a bunch of players. So it's not like Tampa's really going to be lacking. But it will be interesting to see how some of these, players, even on the defense, are really going to favor themselves out. But I think it's kind of interesting how, again, this is all part of the effect. I think it's very interesting, but it also tells you that a lot of these teams, and you're starting to see this with Tampa Bay, Tom Brady buttoned them up, straightened them out. And now they want to win more and more multiple championships. And you know what? That's ultimately what it's supposed to be. So I think it's great. I think it's really, really good. In NBA news, the Atlanta Hawks ended up relieving the duties of Lloyd Pierce and named McMillan their interim head coach. So Pierce ended up compiling a 63 and 120 record in 183 games that he's played with the Atlanta Hawks, and they've missed the playoffs in 2 completed seasons. Now, it's interesting to hear about this with Lloyd Pierce, but here's what's interesting about the Hawks, because the Hawks right now, they are still a young developing team. They just don't quite have the system yet. And I've been saying about this because they have Clint Capella, they have Trae Young. They do have at least a couple of good pieces, even Cam Reddish. It's not like Atlanta is going to be too far away. There are still some developing pieces, but of course it's different in the NBA than it would be in the NFL, because a lot of these draft picks and a lot of these young kids, it's a lot of years of developing. And that's the ones where if you really kind of sign a pact with this, if you're an NBA franchise, it is going to take a lot of time and patience. And I think some of these ownerships, they know that and they realize that. But at the same time, there's a little bit of sense of urgency with some NBA teams. And I think Atlanta, this I think was a move that needed to be made, because Lloyd Pierce was not making it happen. But we'll see what McMillan does as an interim coach, but I'm sure they're going to want to end up scouting and seeing exactly where they can find at least a motivating coach, and at the same time, one that develops a system that is going to build this roster and hopefully at some point get Atlanta back into the playoffs, because they do have some real good talent. I'm not going to lie to you, but it is going to take that right person to get into the office and to also manage the court, manage the floor to make these guys work. So it'll be interesting to see how that will be in the coming days. But that was your hot press. So coming up next, and I'll talk about this, just a little bit before we end up going here up on break, but, talking at least a little bit about the NBA, because I haven't really covered a whole lot on it, but there are some teams that really have been heating up, in the last couple of weeks. I mean, right now, Utah is playing great basketball. The Jazz right now, they're not, not a lot of people have been paying so much attention to the Jazz lately. But they've been 23-3 in their stretch. They're 27-8 right now, and they completely annihilated the Lakers. Donovan Mitchell's been playing real good basketball, and Rudy Gobert's been staying consistent. I'm not saying Utah is going to just, outplay everybody, because a lot of these teams as you look at right now, because this is what I look at with the Western Conference. You got the Jazz, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, the Spurs, and the Trailblazers, and then right there looking outward in is Denver, Golden State, Dallas, and Memphis. So right now, Phoenix, and this is what's also interesting about the Suns, and I've even anticipated this, but the second Chris Paul goes to Phoenix, the Suns were going to be a better team. I even said it. I called it. They were going to be a playoff team. That's no doubt, no question. You've got a veteran experienced player in Chris Paul that's going to bring the best out of Devontae Booker, and is also, Devin Booker, my bad, and is also going to bring the best out of DeAndre Ayton and a lot of these young kids. They're still going to need at least a little bit more developing, but they're not that far away. I think this was a good thing for Phoenix, and now it's really paying off. The Lakers right now have been suffering some injuries, and at the same time, key players are out, Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder. Of course, they're doing their absolute best to still continue to try to strive to win more ball games, but are also at the same time trying to conserve themselves. And really, I don't know what's been up with the Clippers. Even though that they're sitting third in the West, the Clippers are not really the intensified team that a lot of people look at. And I think it's kind of interesting, and it's showing its true colors. Kawhi Leonard's a really good player. Okay, he's impactful, but he's not impactful when it comes to developing a culture. I think he's the kind of guy that if you already have a culture in place, you'll fit him into the bill and he'll seal the deal, and then you could potentially be a championship team. Look at what happened with the Spurs. The Spurs already had a culture when it came to Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and Greg Popovich. Kawhi Leonard fit the bill, and the Spurs won it. Look at Toronto. Toronto, they were always a team that was close but no cigar. And there were so many times that they kept grinding out every single game. And then not to mention playoff after playoff. And they couldn't even expand their true potential. But then once Kawhi Leonard ended up coming in, and you traded away DeMar DeRozan, which it was kind of like a risk reward type thing. The second Kawhi comes into Toronto, interesting spot. Kyle Lowry, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, bunch of key players. They all made it work. They all made it work to the best of their abilities, and they won a championship. If I look at the Eastern Conference right now, because a lot of people are kind of, they're looking at this because right now, Philadelphia, they've been playing good basketball, but I have my doubts about Ben Simmons. I've always have, and I think it's going to be interesting. But the Sixers in the East, they look like they are a tough team. Brooklyn, they're probably one of the most fascinating shooting teams we've ever seen in the Eastern Conference, but they cannot play defense to save their lives. Milwaukee, you're starting to see see a little teeny tiny downfall of what Milwaukee is really capable of. And I like Giannis. I really do. But now you're starting to kind of see some limitations into the game. And by the way, let's not rant and rave about the New York Knicks, please. There are still some young players there that are developing, Obi Toppin and a couple of others. I don't know how long they might keep this up, but I feel like at some point down the stretch, they're going to get burnt out. That's just the way that I look at it, because a lot of these teams now, I mean, the only team that the teams right there in the bottom that I can see is interesting, makes sense, Miami and Boston. I think it's interesting. Then you've got Toronto, Charlotte, Indiana, and Chicago in those last four spots. So I just think right now, the way that I look at the NBA, and with all these injuries, and not to mention having to battle COVID and all this other stuff, It's kind of interesting, but right now you're kind of seeing those competitive teams that are really making the jump. I mean, Philadelphia, they're an interesting team, but they still do need at least a bunch of adjustments, but they are a tough team in the East. The other thing is, too, Utah, they're playing great basketball, but I don't think we should be high on the gun yet with them, knowing the fact of you have LeBron and the Lakers, and you have, you got bits and pieces of the Clippers. Then not to mention, too, you got Phoenix with Chris Paul, who's making an absolute jump. So it's going to be interesting. This is why I just I look at this year and it's very, very interesting and it's fascinating. You can't get enough of it. So, all right. So I'm going to take a break, but when I come back, I'm going to have my best for last, my top 10 Major League Baseball teams going into 2021, because you know what? We've got a season, guys. We're already in spring training. And if you guys haven't done so already, definitely check out the Turn 2 podcast with myself and Jeff Hammond, aka Hammer of Hammer's House, where we are collaborating on a baseball podcast called Turn 2 Podcast, strictly for baseball, talking ins and outs about certain teams, certain players, and of course, our next highlighted team for spring training, because last week we talked about the Arizona Diamondbacks. We'll be talking about the Atlanta Braves and what we should expect from them in the NL East. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely tune in. That's going to be Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys do not want to end up missing that. By the way, for all of our fantasy fanatics about there, coast to coast, nationwide, you guys love playing fantasy, and at the same time, you guys also love winning cold hard cash. Well, there is a place for that, and there is an app that you can download up onto your phone. It's called Thrive Fantasy. When you go online and when you download it at the App Store and Google Play, use promo code SS Network. That is short for Spotlight Sports Network. When you deposit $20 into your first pool play, Thrive Fantasy always promises to match it up to $50 at your first play. So you guys get more. You guys got more in your pocket. You get more fun money to play with, and you guys could be winning up to $15,000 of pool play just by NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, even esports. There's even esports betting. Don't believe me? Check it out. Check it out today. ThriveFantasy.com. Promo code SS Network. That's ThriveFantasy.com. Promo code SS Network.
What's up, fantasy champions? Spotlight Sports Network is excited to tell you about an amazing deal from Thrive Fantasy, your place for daily fantasy sports and esports. Right now, with promo code SS Network, Thrive Fantasy will match up to $50 of your first deposit. So go to ThriveFantasy.com and sign up now with promo code SS Network. That's ThriveFantasy.com, promo code SS Network.
Once a Raider, bruh, always a Raider, bruh. Shit simple as that. You look silver and black. Lot of bread invested in that O-line. Car insurance cost the arm and the leg to reach that goal line. It's go time.
All right, folks. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank all of you guys for jumping on here on a beautiful Monday night, wherever you guys may be. And I want to thank all of you guys for your love and support here on the show. And of course, also on the network. We really do appreciate it and love every single one of you guys. So my best for last here in this one, I think this is very, very interesting. But we got baseball back. Finally. And if you guys haven't checked it out, I'm also co-hosting with a show on the Spotlight Sports Network at Turn 2 Podcast, talking about baseball strictly. A lot of baseball ins and outs, a lot of different players, different places, and so much more that we can expect from. And of course, we also have our spotlighted, our spotlighted team of the week. So this up and coming week, we've got the Atlanta Braves. So that'll be on Wednesday. You guys do not want to end up missing that. 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We really do appreciate you guys, and check it out. But we're going to get down to the nitty gritty here, because I'm looking at my top 10 teams here in Major League Baseball. I think it's going to be very interesting how this season really, really pans out. But there are a bunch of teams that I know that are going to get competitive. I think at the same time are ones that I think, when you look at it, because each of these teams now, they're going to be tough. They're going to be very, very tough all throughout the stretch. But this is going to be very interesting from here. But let's take a look at the top 10 MLB teams going into 2021. Cue the music. Here we go. All right, so at number 10 right now, the way that I look at it, I've got the St. Louis Cardinals sitting right there. Listen, they've got some serious offense with them now. I know that they ended up losing a couple of pieces like Dexter Fowler and Colton Wong, but they made a massive jump the second they went and got Nolan Arenado. Offensive third baseman, solidifies their position. They've also got Paul Goldschmidt, and the other thing is, too, you still got veteran presence with Adam Wainwright and with Yadi Molina. Now, it will be interesting to see how the rest of the pitching staff really follows up, especially Jack Flaherty. But Arizona's got, St. Louis does have some interesting pieces. Harrison Bader, I think, is going to have a pretty good season. But I'd like to see where St. Louis really plays themselves in this particular scenario. But I think it will be interesting to see where this all kind of adds up. Number 9, I'm definitely putting the Oakland A's here in this one. This is reasonable for me because one thing about the A's, they still do have the necessary pieces. They do have some of those key players, but this is also a team that's moving away from Marcus Semien. They're moving away from, a bunch of these young players, but they still managed to retain Mike Fiers, Ramon Laureano, and they're going to get Matt Chapman healthy, and he'll be back up onto the field. And then you also have Elvis Andrus that they ended up trading Chris Davis for, which I think was an interesting move for sure. But they needed a shortstop, and they got one. I think Elvis Andrus does bring a good defensive glove, but I also do think there is also some offense that needs to, I think at the same time needs to make it happen. So I think the A's sitting comfortably at 9th is fine enough for me, but we'll see exactly how the season really pans out. If they get themselves up on a good streak, don't be surprised. But also, too, they lost their closer in Liam Hendricks. So I think this is going to be interesting to see them really kind of play this out for this up and coming year. But I think it's reasonable to put them in number 9. I'm putting the Tampa Bay Rays at number 8 because this is a team that made it into the World Series, But here's also why I put them in 8th. Now, that could change. That could very much change in the coming days because they're coming off of losing Blake Snell, which they should have never pulled him out in the World Series. I think we all know that. But they also do have some interesting bats. G-Man Choi, Austin Meadows. They do have at least a couple good bats, even Manuel Margot. So they've got some offense on them. But I also do see that the pitching staff is still lethal, especially that bullpen. And the other thing is Chris Archer is making his return back to Tampa Bay. They also are bringing in a couple of real good arms. So Tampa Bay is still keeping the reputation as a tough pitching team. But I do think that the offense is going to be pretty questionable. But we'll see exactly how this offense really produces. I just think right now the pitching staff is the reason why this team is number 8. Because I cannot steer away that pitching staff knowing that the bullpen's really good. The rotation, who knows? But I think Tyler Glasnow has proven he can be that number 1 starter. I think there are still some adjustments that need to be made in his pitching mechanics, but also having Chris Archer back is really going to shake things up. Now, who knows? Are you going to get the Chris Archer from Tampa Bay years ago, or is this going to be something where they really need to work on that? So I think it's reasonable putting Tampa at number 8. Number 7, this is going to surprise a lot of people, but I'm putting the Toronto Blue Jays up there. Why I think Toronto at number 7. So they do have at least a bunch of young kids. Kevin Biggio, Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. Then you also have Nate Pearson, the pitcher, young kid, throws a lot of heat. And you also have Hunter Ryu. You also have a couple of pieces. And they signed George Springer to a contract. So Toronto's kind of mixing some stuff up. Now, they could be an impactful team. I don't think they're a superior impactful team. They want to be competitive in the AL East, knowing that you got the Yankees, knowing that you got Tampa Bay. Boston's kind of questionable, and you already kind of know what's happening with Baltimore anyway. But I think this is reasonable putting Toronto at number 7. This is going to be a fun watching team with a lot of young kids. Decent pitching. It's not great. The one thing that I'd like to see is how their bullpen really shapes up. But I think this is going to be a fun team. I think this is going to be a fun watching team. And I do expect Bo Bichette to really kind of pick things up where he left off last year. Number 6, this was kind of interesting for me. But I think number 6 is definitely the New York Mets. Why I think the Mets right now are in the 6th spot, and they're kind of close to halfway. They go and get Francisco Lindor, and they go and get Carlos Carrasco. They got rotation, and they've even got a good stick and real good defense at shortstop. And not to mention, you look at this infield with J.D. Davis at 3rd, or you could throw him anywhere else, even Jeff McNeil. Then you also have Lindor there, McNeil at 2nd. And you got either Dominic Smith or Pete Alonso that can switch off first base at any point. But I think the Mets, there are still some pieces that I think they are very much looking for. Bullpen is one that is going to be extreme help, but also the rotation. The rotation is going to be very intriguing, in my opinion. Knowing you have Jacob deGrom as your number 1, we're waiting for Noah Syndergaard to come back healthy. You're going to have Thor back, Carlos Carrasco, and a bunch of young kids that are on the low end part, of the rotation. But they have a lot of real good arms. And by the way, I think the one guy that's a wild card in this rotation is Jordan Yamamoto, the guy that got from Miami. I liked his mechanics. I think he could be a very interesting 4, if not 5 guy in the rotation. But we'll see how that pans out. I think that'll be fascinating to watch here for the New York Mets. But they have officially marked themselves on the map as a team nobody's going to play around with in the National League. Number 5 is the Chicago White Sox. I think Chicago, they're picking up where they left off of last year. They do have a lot of really good young talents. Jose Abreu, Yohan Moncada, Luis Robert. They've got a lot of really good young players, but I'd like to see how they pick up from last year's performance. Luis Robert gave us a taste of what his play style is. Eloy Jimenez, I think, is going to rebound back, and I think he's going to bounce back bigger and better than ever. Jose Abreu was coming off of a short season MVP caliber year, and I think he's capable of being that guy that's an offensive producer with his stick. The other part is you've got a pitching rotation where you've got you got Lucas Giolito, you got a couple of real good arms. Now I'd like to see how Ronaldo Lopez pitches out. And also Hendricks as their closer. They've been making some serious moves. Now, how legit are the White Sox? I don't know. I mean, they're coming off of, a year where they make it into the wild card, lost to the A's in a 2-1 series. But I think that was a taste of getting them back into the postseason. And now let's see where the jump hits for them. Number 4, I've got to say, is the New York Yankees. The Yankees right now, they have a bunch of good young stars. They even got real good pitching. But the reason why that they're stuck there at number 4 is because the injury prone, the injury plagues. Lots of key guys have been injured last season. It's just like they cannot get this bug away. They really can. And New York does have a lot of talent. They have a lot of talent. Pitching staff's good. The rotation's good. But the matters of are most of them going to stay healthy? That's a big question. I think the Yankees, they're going to make noise, but the real question that still is being held is, I think, will they be a superior team that's going to make noise? That's questionable. That is very, very questionable. I think, in my opinion, at number 3, because this is very, very tough for me to even predict this out, but I am going with the Atlanta Braves. The Braves right now, the way that I see this, I mean, my God, they got Marcell Ozuna for cheap. They were able to keep him for cheap. And Ozuna had a real good offensive season. You're going to have Dansby Swanson healthy. Ronald Acuna, I think, is going to have a bounce back year. Ozzie Albies is still going to stay as that consistent player in that lineup and on defense. But I also do think the rotation's a little different because the Braves are getting Charlie Morton. And also, I also do think that the rotation needs a little, the bullpen needs some help. Because they need to be able to close out games, and they also need to have guys that are willing to be setup guys that are going to keep leads on their side. Because that was kind of their problem. The rotation, you're going to get Mike Soroka back. You're going to have Max Fried, and then you're also going to have a couple of real good young arms in the rotation. So that's not going to be an issue for Atlanta moving forward. But you are going to hope that those guys are going to stay healthy. So I feel like it's right to put Atlanta at number 3. And by the way, Freddie Freeman had a great year last year. A guy that nobody really talks a whole lot about his production and his offense and his defense. So he's really been the catalyst for their lineup. But I think Atlanta sitting up at number 3, that's going to be a team looking in. Number 2 is definitely going to be the San Diego Padres. This has been a team that has really been making a hell of a lot of noise. Blake Snell, Yu Darvish, you signed Fernando Tatis Jr. to a long-term extended deal. You also ended up getting a bunch of young players from rotation to filling in the lineup, filling in the defense. Padres are making some serious moves right now, and I already know why. Nobody has to explain to me why the Padres have been making the moves that they have. It's because of one team in particular. and that's going to be the next up-and-coming team. But they want to make noise this year. The National League is going to be very, very competitive. Now, I don't know what's in store for the American League because there are at least a few teams that are there. But they are making some serious noise. Now, who knows if all of these players are really going to pan out? And again, this is probably the most expensive infield I've ever seen, close to $1 billion. Okay, $812 million on an infield. I don't know how that's going to shape, and I do not know how that's going to work. But San Diego's making some serious noise, getting rotation guys, getting at least a few bullpen pieces. I think San Diego, I cannot say that they are legit yet because sometimes that does. We've seen this with San Diego before. They went and got Justin Upton. They went and got James Shields. They went and got a lot of these guys, even Craig Kimbrell, and they thought that worked, and it did. It didn't pan out for them. So I think that'll be very interesting. But here's also my number one team that is still going to stay consistent. So it's going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers, the defending world champions of 2020, even in a shortened season. I know how a lot of people feel about the Los Angeles Dodgers, but here is the thing. The reason why that the Dodgers are sitting up at number one here at this moment, because you're still getting at least a couple of real good young talents. Gavin Lux, you've got Cody Bellinger, Austin Barnes. You do have a lot of real good players still around, and Justin Turner's extended for a couple of years. And you've got rotation guys. You go and get Trevor Bauer in the middle of the rotation. And by the way, David Price is going to be back this year. So it seems like the Dodgers, they are still a tough competitive team. How competitive are they? It's going to, like, that question will at some point be answered in the middle of the season. But I do think the Dodgers are continuing their reputation of being the tough team in the National League. And even in Major League Baseball. So I think the Dodgers are still going to keep their consistency as a tough team. I mean, they're the defending champs. They want to go back-to-back. You look at how the Lakers were. Lakers upgraded a couple of pieces because they want to go back-to-back. They want to still be the toughest team in the NBA and the toughest team in the Western Conference. The Dodgers go and make at least a couple of moves, and they still want to be competitive in the National League. So that's a team to beat. But San Diego is a team that's looking in. And I love what I've seen from some of these teams, but I also really do love how I've set this all up for top 10s. So, folks, that is my top 10 going into the 2021 season. I have the Cardinals at number 10. I have the A's at number 9. Number 8, I do have the Rays there. I have the Blue Jays at number 7. Number 6, I have the New York Mets. Number 5, the Chicago White Sox. Number 4, the Yankees. The Braves at number 3. Padres at number 2. And the Dodgers at number 1. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to ask me about why the Twins never made the top 10, in my opinion. Well, here's the thing about the Twins. Every year, it seems like the Twins always punch their ticket into the postseason, but they could never, ever win a postseason series. And I don't understand that. Like, they have a lot of really good pieces. Josh Donaldson, Max Kepler, Byron Buxton, Miguel Sano. They have a bunch of these really good guys. But it just doesn't seem like the second they get into the postseason, they just can't do anything. And then a lot of people ask me about, the Astros and all that other stuff. Well, the Astros are still going to be competitive, but I don't think they'll be as competitive as they were in the last couple seasons. And then, of course, you look at the Cleveland Indians. The Cleveland Indians have good arms with Shane Bieber. They did get rid of Francisco Lindor. They did get rid of a couple pieces. But I feel like Cleveland is at a point where they'll get into a good streak and then I feel like could fall off the wagon. The Phillies have lineup guys. They don't have a rotation. They really don't. I don't even know who's even involved in the rotation outside of Aaron Nola. They don't have the rotation. They don't have the bullpen. I don't know exactly who's left. And then you look at the Cubs. I'm interested to see how the Chicago Cubs are really going to pan this thing out, because they're bringing Jake Arrieta back and they lose John Lester. There's a couple of a couple of important pieces here, and they still do have Chris Bryant. They still do have Anthony Rizzo. They have Javi Baez. But the question is, for how long is Chris Bryant really going to stay in Chicago? Everybody is paying attention to him, and they still do have Wilson Contreras and David Bodie that's also coming up. And I don't know. I really don't know with the Cubs. I feel like that they've kind of taken an extended period of time with some of these players and with all of this and that. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to see from the Chicago Cubs, but it'll be very interesting. But thank God, guys, baseball's back. I'm a baseball fanatic. I grew up playing it. I grew up watching it. And like hockey, it just seems like it was. It's just like, I'm excited for this. It took so long, but it's finally here. We're finally up in spring training. So I feel you, BL. I have no idea. You're in the same boat as I. I don't know what to think of the Cubs. I think you and Gooley would probably be up in the same boat. I don't know what to think of the Cubs. I feel like the Cubs are playing the same way that the Chicago Blackhawks are, in my opinion. So, all right, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me here on this beautiful Monday night on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Really do appreciate your guys' love and support. Like I said, if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications on futures and, of course, past shows. Really do appreciate you guys. Have a great night, and we will see you guys tomorrow night. Take care. Have a good night. See you guys later.